Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqna.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I am absolutely thrilled. I was just chatting to Naomi offline. Thrilled to introduce our next speaker for the 24 hours, and grateful to Gene for handing this over so he can have a break, but I can have a chat to some really lovely people online as well. Let me do intro first, Naomi. Naomi Janzen is an accredited master trainer of clinical EFT with evidence-based EFT and EFT International, as well as a certified energy psychology practitioner. She's been tapping since 2008. Exploring the intersection between science and spirituality, Naomi is the author of the forthcoming books, Tapping Out of Depression, When You Barely Care Enough to Try, and I'm Not That, A Soul's Journey. She is the co-creator of the tapping and meditation site One Mind Live and the creator of Remindfulness. It is a top 10 mindfulness app on positive psychology. She is also, in her spare time, a screenwriter for more than 25 years and has worked on movie projects such as The Portal, you may have seen that one, and The Science of Tapping with our friends Craig and Alina. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Naomi today and to talk about a really, really cool topic. Hello, Naomi.
Hello, Peter. So nice to see you as always. And I'm so excited to be here.
We like chatting, and sorry, everyone, you're just going to be listening into our conversation today, which we hope you gain things from. So we are going to talk about today, Naomi, which I think is such a powerful topic, in how to tap for negative memories, but without talking about them. And I know, often people can do their tapping and think that something's sort of done and dusted, but then if they still lean back into it or it pops back to mind, they actually still get a lot of detail about it. And I'm wondering, can we start there? Why is it that we can do tapping on something, but then if we were to think back or something reminded us of it, it actually still seems to have a lot of detail in there?
Well, what I've discovered, because I used to think that when you tap on thoughts and emotions and you feel better, you can remember something without any emotional charge. I used to think that, okay, now it's done. And that's the goal, right? So to be able to think about what happened and think about it clearly and not remember and not actually feel triggered in any way. What I discovered, and I talked about this in a lot more detail in a previous 24 Hours of Tapping a couple of years ago when I was talking with Gene about it. So anybody wants to go back and look at that to get into the deep dive of it, was that people would be coming to me with, because I tap with a lot of practitioners because I'm a trainer, and people would come to me and say, I want to work on, this particular thing. We'd start tapping on it and it would go back to a memory that they had done so much tapping on. And they would just be throwing up their hands like, I can't believe this is back again. I've tapped on this so much and I've done a good job of tapping on it because I know what I'm doing. And what I found out was that there was an extra a layer that wasn't being addressed. Mm. And that level was at the level of the sensory, your ability to still tune into that memory and access the experience on a sensory basis, sensing being the five senses, what you can see, smell, hear, taste, touch, physical feeling. To the extent that you can still access those details about a memory, there is a part of you that is still holding on and is still kind of attached to, or another way of looking at it is that memory is still impacting you at very deep levels. So that's why you might still have the issue, even though cognitively, emotionally, you feel better. There's you're still kind of in it. You're still kind of experiencing it. And that what I found is that when we go in that really granular way and we just tap on the five senses and just tap, well, we tune in to how clearly you remember this visual or this sound.
And is it important to be remembering it quite clearly?
Well, yeah. And usually, I mean, look, you can tap on a memory that you don't remember really, really clearly, and it becomes clearer as you tap on it, because as we know, tapping continue in before it actually clears things. So I've tapped with people on memories that they think it's hazy because they've done a lot of tapping on it. And all that other tapping they've done is really good because it's taken the edge off it, So now this is kind of the fine-tooth comb, which is sometimes necessary. And then as they start just focusing on the sensory aspects, like maybe there's a hazy visual, and then as they're tapping, that visual gets clearer and clearer and clearer. And there may or may not be emotion that comes up. But what we're aiming for on that scale, of 1 to 10, the intensity, the SUD scale we talk about a lot, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is the most intense you can, in sort of reaction you can be feeling, or emotion, or whatever it is that you're working on. With clarity tapping, you're working on the clarity. So 10 out of 10 is I might as well be in the experience right now that it's that clear. I can see it that clearly. I can smell that freshly cut grass that clearly. I can, etc. And 0 is I have to kind of work to put it together. Like I know what the different aspects of that memory are, but I can't experience it. It's like I just kind of have a concept of it. But that concept can be really clear if you need those details for some reason.
So you just mentioned clarity tapping, and is that the name that kind of emerged out of this approach, if you like? And, just on the back of my conversation about vision and tapping and clear and things, it's just so perfect, because is that what this is called?
Yes, it's called clarity tapping, and it's exactly for that reason that we're working on the clarity of that memory of the visual, the clarity of the sound, the clarity of the smell, the taste of the physical, maybe how cold it was or how warm it was at the time. And something that I heard Gene say when he was talking about the peaceful heart thing that I wanted to kind of flag is he mentioned that, peaceful heart works with people who are struggling with things they had to see that they really, none of us want to see, and I, you hear people in the media talking about maybe a tragedy, or maybe you're reading a book about someone's experience and they say that visual will be with me the rest of my life, Yep. It doesn't have to be, and that's what's kind of so important and powerful. And clarity tapping, I think of as you wouldn't do it on a trauma until you had first done all the other, worked with a practitioner to be safe, et cetera, done all of the other techniques to kind of take the edges off it, to get it within that window of tolerance so that you can actually focus on those sensory details without it being triggering or just too overwhelming.
Because I'm using that fine-tooth comb that you mentioned before, I'm guessing that it is going to take such a sort of laser focus that if you hadn't done all of that tapping to kind of, layers of the onion, kind of, just gently kind of deal with some of the big kind of stuff around the edges, because this sounds like you're really going to start to pay attention to the senses that you mentioned, and so it is really going to be quite detailed, isn't it? Which could be quite confronting.
Yes, definitely. It's like an analogy I came up with is, for anybody who's ever done any sanding of wood, if it's really rough, you don't want the sandpaper that's what's the higher the number of the sandpaper, the finer the grain. You wouldn't use like a 400 sandpaper on a really rough board because you just shred the sandpaper. But on the other hand, once you've used the other grades of sandpaper and you've got and woodworkers know this, that you sort of gradually work down, and you keep using a finer and finer grade of it and grain of sandpaper. By the time you get down to that final, a lot of woodworkers wouldn't skip that final stage of using the absolute finest grain sandpaper, because that's when you get that really good finish. And the word finish is kind of appropriate too, because then these memories are really, truly finished.
Wow, it's such a good analogy. I haven't had you tell me that analogy yet.
I come up with new analogies. We have to keep it fresh,
Yeah, other thing that Naomi does brilliantly is she actually then creates all these graphics that match the analogy. So you actually then get this visual. So I task you to make a visual that matches the sandpaper and the timber.
I'll be in Canva.
So tell me, to come back to our topic then, how can you use this level of clarity tapping and this kind of, really zoning in here with these kind of senses when you don't want to talk about the memory, or how can that actually then be used without talking about something?
Well, when I first started developing this way of working, I had people focus on a visual. So they would say, even though I remember this visual of the car coming towards me, I accept myself. And then they're tapping and they're saying this visual of the car coming towards me, this visual of the car, and they're describing the visual. But when it came to an auditory, when it came to a sound, I was working with a client who had been a really mean thing had been said to her by her grandmother when she was a child. And that was in another country, in another language. And one of the ways that I wanted to test when we had collapsed the intensity was to say, I want you to actually now remember it in her actual words in the language she was speaking. And all this extra intensity came up, which, by the way, happens a lot. If I have a client now that's English as a second language, always make sure we go and actually work in their language. I don't have to be able to repeat what they're saying. So I would just say, I want you to just focus, instead of saying, even though my grandmother said, you're a terrible little girl, I accept myself. So instead of saying that, I would say, even though my grandmother said, and I said, focus on what she said, play it in your mind. Mm-hmm. And then we would tap, and I wouldn't say anything because I don't want my voice getting in the way of her accessing directly the sound of the grandmother's voice, especially, in that other language. So we're just tapping. I'm just guiding her through the tapping points, and she's just tuning it in while she taps. Well, when I started doing clarity tapping, I started naturally doing that with the clarity of any auditory. And then I discovered I can do that with all the senses. And then I discovered it's faster because they're not repeating after me. I'm just guiding them and giving them little prompts, like saying things like this, I'm focusing on this visual, and I just say to the client, keep tapping, and I don't have to do anything with this. I'm just letting myself notice that I can remember this really clear visual, trying to see it as clearly as I can, like those kinds of prompts, but not requiring the client to repeat anything. It goes faster. But the other thing is that I found that at the end of a session, there were a lot of instances where a memory was cleared completely and I didn't even know what the memory was.
Yeah.
And I didn't need the details, and maybe at the very end, if we've completely cleared something and it's once they've worked on for a long time, I might say, now tell it back to me, just to make sure there's no triggering when you say it aloud. But then I thought, this makes clarity tapping really usable for people on their own. And I wanted to bring something to this conversation for the people watching to love it when people are empowered to be able to do tapping on their own. And the words are often a big issue for people. How do I get the words right? It can be a stopper. So with clarity tapping, with doing it without words, you don't need words. You're just focusing on what you're remembering, just making sure you keep your attention on that one aspect at a time.
And I guess that is why it is important to know that you can tap without talking about it, that, being able to kind of stay present, because often people, when they might learn tapping, might learn it out loud. So saying words out loud, which can perhaps distract from. So, do you want to comment on that, just about when you're new to tapping and perhaps when you've just learnt it?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because when people first come to tapping, we're all learning, we're all saying it out loud because that's kind of one of the ways you learn, right? And so I'm sometimes surprised when people say, oh, you don't have to say things out loud. It's almost like they think it's like that's kind of a magic element. And what I say to people is the words are important to the extent that they tune you in. Mm. And if the words get in the way, don't use words. So, for example, if someone's trying to describe an emotion that they feel when they think back to a memory that was at a pre-verbal time in their life, and they say, it's hard to describe it, and I say, please stop, don't try to describe it, because do you feel it? And they go, yeah. And I go, that's all we need. Let's go. Because I don't want them now trying to translate to me something that it would be impossible to say. So I just really try to emphasize sometimes saying it out loud can increase the exposure to it and give you even sort of that more thorough healing. And I'll sometimes say to people, does it help you tune in to say the words or not? And sometimes they surprise me. The client will go, yeah, it does. I would like you to repeat, like, let's say it out loud. And I'm so glad that I asked, when that's the case. And then a lot of times they'll just say, no, I can stay focused on it. Depends what we're working on and what the issue.
Yeah. And I think that pre-verbal comment that you made is a really important one, that often, that first couple of years of life, it is stored, but it's emotional and there are no words because the brain wasn't developed yet. And to know that you can use tapping on that kind of, element or that time frame in life, and even, intergenerational kind of contributions and things like that as well. So look, I'm wondering, and I'm thinking, it might be time for some tapping. And
yes,
would you be okay to guide us through? So if anyone is listening in, and I know people are on the chats there, and want to have a go at this, maybe you could kind of, walk us through what this looks like, particularly without the need to have to talk about something.
Absolutely. And I would love it if everybody watching and people watching the replay will be able to do this, and anybody watching now will be able to rewind, like watch it again later and do this again. If you've got something, you can write down a number, write something down at home. And what I want you to do is think of something specific that happened. And Peter, you and I are going to tap on something that you don't even have to, it could be anything, because you're never going to tell anybody what it is. You're just going to tell me if you can feel a difference, right? So,
yep.
So focus on finding a memory. So it's a specific thing that happened in a specific time and place. That's how we know it's a specific memory. We want the intensity to be no higher than a 7. Right. So, and usually this keeps us safe. It keeps us working on something that either we've done enough other work on, and this would be a great chance to take that memory that you've done so much tapping on. Peter, do you have a memory that you've done lots of tapping on?
Yes. So I did get a heads up from Naomi to think of one of these. So yes, a memory that specific time and place. I can tell you age. I'm about 5.5 years old.
Okay.
My sister is in the memory as well, and I've done tapping on this. I've done matrix. I've revisited myself in the memory. Yet, if I still look at the memory, it feels like there's still something there.
Okay, so then we get a clarity rating. When you look back at that memory,
yep.
we call it the event clarity rating. What's the clarity of that out of 10?
And 10 is like the crystal clear clarity?
Yep. 10 is I might as well be experiencing it right now.
If I look at it, it's very clear to me. It's not fuzzy. It's not distant. It's very clear.
Okay, so if you were to give a number, and you don't have to, I mean, you can say medium and high clarity or whatever, but
no, probably like a 9 out of 10 for clarity.
Okay. So we take that 9, we park that to the side. We're going to refer to it later. Where's that clarity coming from? Is it mainly a visual? Is it a sound? Is it any of the other senses?
It is a visual. So as in, if I was looking at it like a snapshot, it's a visual, but there is a sense to it. So there is, in my younger self, the sense is heaviness.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up, because what we do with clarity tapping is we let those senses, we let those emotions, we let thoughts just kind of be there. They're going to process in the background. Okay. But if you just look at the visual and you give it a clarity rating out of 10, how clearly can you see that visual?
Yeah, like 10 out of 10.
All right, side of the hand, and everybody tapping at home, if you have a visual, then think of what your visual is now. And all you have to do, I don't want anybody trying to get rid of it. I just want you focusing on it as clearly as you can while you tap. So we'll do the setup statement. We only do it once with clarity tapping, even though I have this very clear visual.
Even though I have this very clear visual.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Okay, just focus on that visual. Do your best to see it. Notice any details about it. Notice all the aspects of that visual. Maybe some parts are clearer than others. Really try to see it clearly. And we go through again, just trying to see it as clearly as you can. And if it helps to close your eyes, if anybody wants to do that too, feel free, because we're not working on something.
Just looking over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just making sure it's not too intense. You shouldn't be working on it anyway if it's too intense to close your eyes. Okay, good. Stop and checking in now. Just take another look at that visual and try to see it as clearly as you can. What's your number out of 10?
7.
It's dropped a little. Okay, side of the hand. Even though I'm still doing my best to see this.
Even though I'm still doing my best to see this.
As clearly as I can.
As clearly as I can.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
So just focusing again. And there might be elements of this visual that don't seem important to your conscious mind. Just notice if there's any detail. It could be a background. It could be a light switch. It could be a branch. It doesn't matter. If it's clear, just notice it. And maybe some parts are blurrier than other parts of the visual. Notice that too. And you're just the observer. So if anything happens to this visual, you'll notice what it is. One more time through the points as you do your best to see it as clearly as you can. Okay, let's stop and check in. All right, now take another look at that visual. Has anything happened to the clarity of it now?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I'm like, Naomi, what is happening? It's like, when you have a picture, you mentioned Canva, and you might change the transparency, but it's like the transparencies becomes darker. So it was becoming darker, as in I can't make out the image much anymore. It's like someone, and I wasn't consciously turning a dial or anything, but it's like the transparency's been turned up or down or whatever. So it's become like darker.
Right. Okay. That's a common one that I hear. Sometimes I hear it's getting pixelated. It's getting like disappearing around the edges, fuzzy further away. For different people, it might be different things. And if we were doing a full session, I would keep going on that until you were apologizing for not being able to see it at all. But but just scan that memory now, the other senses, and just notice if there is a smell or a sound or a taste or any physical sensation.
No, I'm not getting any. I'm getting a 3 out of 10 as a number coming to mind, but I'm not getting any other sense. No.
Well, you said something a little earlier. You talked about a memory being stored in when you talked about pre-verbal, and the emotion might still be stored. Well, this thing that I've noticed with clarity tapping is that the experience can still be stored at a level even below emotion. So with clarity tapping, sometimes people will say, well, I can only half see it now, but there's no emotion. Or they might say, I can still see it clearly, but I don't feel anything, so I'm done. And I just say, let's keep going. Because at a deeper level than even your emotions can reach, there can be impacts stored in the body. So when you look back, and I don't know how much time we've got left, so I don't want to.
We have about 15. That's okay.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. So when you focus, I want you to focus on that 3. And were you going to ask a question? Because I want to make sure.
Yeah, but we'll come to it. I want to talk about that pre-verbal tapping, because I know you've probably had lots of clients. So I do want to talk about application there, but let's finish this. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So go to that 3 out of 10, because sometimes people feel like, oh, I can hardly see it. It's really dark. And it's a 3. 3 is 30%.
Yeah.
That's, you know what I mean? I put it into a percentage and go, yeah, let's stay on it. Okay. Side of the hand, even though it's gotten darker.
Even though it's gotten darker.
I'm still doing my best to see it as clearly as I can.
I'm still doing my best to see it as clearly as I can.
And I deeply and completely accept myself.
And I deeply and completely accept myself.
And just focus on that visual. Try to scan it. And I'm going to ask you, are you seeing it in first person, like through the eyes of your 5-year-old self, or are you seeing it from outside yourself?
Outside.
Okay. So focus on that. Are you able to get it any clearer when you try?
No.
Okay. Now, as we go through, I want you to see if you can step inside your 5-year-old self and see through her eyes.
Oh, okay. Hang on. I'll have to close my eyes. I'll just
That
keep
one
going.
you got to close your eyes for. Yeah.
Yeah, that part I have to. I can be inside myself, but the scene around me doesn't seem to be there. Does that make sense?
In terms of if you're inside yourself, it's more of an interoceptive kind of thing. It's not like you don't have a visual anymore. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't have a visual of what was happening around outside myself. Yeah,
Okay.
so if I go inside my, associate now and look through her eyes, I'm not seeing what I was seeing before by looking at it as a photo. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything. I'm just looking at, something shifted, something.
Okay. So just scan again. See if that, well, because you're kind of outside your body in this memory, you're just seeing the photo. You might not have a taste or a smell or something, but I usually ask people just scan it and just see if there is something.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not getting anything.
So now if there are no more aspects left, so everybody at home too, if there are aspects left, just sometimes I find it helpful to just organize yourself, make a list and sort of write down, you can draw a picture of a little eye and an ear and a nose and just kind of have a column and write down the different parts of that memory and what's the clarity of each of those parts. And then just in kind of a really methodical way, just work your way through. Really important not to try to get rid of or dissolve, but you're just trying to focus on it. Let the tapping do what the tapping does best. And so once you get to the end and you've got nothing left and you're really struggling to remember it, and you're also sometimes feeling a little bit bored by the event because it doesn't feel relevant anymore because you 100% know it was in the past, then I would say, looking back at that entire memory now, what's the clarity of it out of 10?
Like a 2 or less is what I'm getting, just a 2 or less.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, where is that 2 coming from? Is it a visual, a taste, an emotion maybe?
It's a visual. So it is just the transparency bit I talked about. It's like it's not, I can still see through that. And that would only be 20%. She won't let me off the hook, everybody.
You're not getting off the hook.
You're not off the hook. Okay.
Even though this is what I'm seeing now.
This is what I'm seeing now.
It's only a 2.
It's only a 2.
But Naomi's making me tap on it anyway.
Naomi's making me tap. I would make me tap too.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Okay, really, really look at that transparency. Try to see any detail you can. And notice if there are any details that seem unimportant. You might notice details you'd never seen before, even if you can't see them very well. And back to the top of the head.
I'm finding myself drifting because I'm a bit bored.
That's when we know. That's when we know.
I'm like, I should tell you. I'm just like, I don't know.
No, I love that happened.
No, I don't know what I'm tapping on.
I tell my clients, if you need to yawn, in case I forget to tell you, that's not insulting to me. That's what we're working towards, and same thing. If you find that a memory gets really boring, it usually means that it's at every level now, at every level, not just cognitively and emotionally, but also at a somatic level, you really know it's in the past.
Yeah, it was really funny because it is like a bit of a photo, but it's like it was curling. You know, like old photos curl up and you can't see them anymore.
Oh,
That's
wow.
kind of that's sort of what happened. Yeah.
Interesting. And is that memory, and you don't have to tell me what it is, but we have this analogy of the tabletops and table legs in tapping. And the tabletop issue, and then is supported by the table legs, which are the specific things that happen to us, memories and so on. Is this a table leg for a tabletop that you are aware of?
Yes, I would say yes. Yeah.
Okay. Is that tabletop a core belief or is it an emotion?
It probably would have been a core belief, but that particular core belief doesn't really exist for me anymore.
Cool. So it'd be interesting to then see, and if you have any other sort of memories that are table legs of this particular issue, do the same thing to it. Just kind of go around with the fine sandpaper, and you might get even further shifts or collapse those tables 100%.
Amazing. And I guess because it's a bit mind blowing, because it's kind of like you're like, what? It's just like, so do you think part of what is happening here, because you're literally giving me permission to keep just looking at it, like at no level are you saying, let's try and reduce it, let's try and make it fuzzy. It is total acceptance of just keep trying to see it as clearly as you can. It's creating a cognitive dissonance at some level where I'm like, I'm allowed, it's a bit like I'm allowed to fully accept it. But the tapping itself, we know physiologically, is having such a profound impact, obviously, at brain areas. Is that what you think is happening here?
Absolutely. And I will say this applies to all tapping, because I had a client once say to me, and she was a practitioner, and she showed up for a session, and I said, how'd you go with your homework? And she goes, I suck at my homework. When I do my tapping, my self-tapping, I don't get any result. But when I tap with you, I have this result, and I don't understand. And I said to her, when you're tapping, are you having the intention to get rid of it? And she goes, yeah, of course. And I said, stop doing that. Because I want you to have the intention, the part of you that is engaged in the process cognitively and emotionally has the intention to feel it, to think it, to be in it. And then, oh, nothing. I just happen to be doing this, you forget your time. Because what I tell people is the tapping itself is taking care of whatever needs to be taken care of. Your job is to really feel it. Sometimes it's the client's first permission they've ever been given to feel a certain emotion. Amazing. Especially the messy ones, and so it is really important. And that is why I reinforce with the clarity tapping. Come on, keep trying to see it clearly, try to hear that as clearly as possible, try to taste that as clearly as possible. And
brilliant.
And at a really, really sort of developmental, it's great. You were going to mention about early developmental, were you, or? Yeah.
Yeah. So I did want to just have a note. Yep. Look, we've got about 5 minutes. I think we can go deep fast.
We can.
So we do have a lot stored before the brain develops to that cognitive level, picture memories and things like that, 2 or 3 years of age. So how is someone using clarity tapping then, if perhaps they may have been told a story, perhaps about their birth process. They may just have intuitive information that I think something happened to me. How can they use that with clarity tapping when they may not have a visual?
That's a great question. And sometimes clarity tapping isn't the right thing to use. Sometimes they might just have an emotion or a body sensation that isn't the memory of a body sensation. It's a body sensation I have now when I think about the fact that, I was, in that orphanage for the first year of my life, and I don't remember anything about it. But when you start tapping on those kinds of things, sometimes there is a visual that comes up. And I know from my own tapping on early childhood stuff, the visual, if you're saying to yourself, am I imagining this? Then you're probably working on an early developmental memory. And I just say, it doesn't matter. Let's just go with what is. So with clarity tapping, it's the senses, but it's very important to tap on whatever you have for anything, and early, it can just be an idea. If it's a story that you were told, like you were told a story about your birth, and that's one that's I've had a number of times with clients, or you were told about how difficult the pregnancy was when you were in the womb. They don't have any memory of it, so there's nothing to do clarity tapping on. But you can just tap on the thought, and often emotion comes up, thinking about and new insights. And even I did work with someone once who was doing this and then had this visual of just redness, which could that have been sort of like a sense of what it was like to be in the womb? It doesn't matter. If you've got it, tap on it. It's not going to be a problem to just tap on it. So, and you can get really, really great results just by staying with whatever's there for you, tapping on it, not needing to know whether it's true, accurate, or not. And then just applying the basic rule of don't try to get rid of it. Try to lean into it. Try to focus on it. And then, oh, I happen to be tapping. That's doing something.
That's so brilliant. And I think if anyone listening in, either now live or down the track, that's that one thing to take away from this. Just, absolutely lean into it and embrace it, and just tap at the same time, just inconspicuously along the side here. Just allow yourself to give yourself permission to lean into that. That is so brilliant. I can't wait to read these books that I know are coming out.
I know. And it was embarrassing as you're reading it, a forthcoming book, such and such. I've got a third one going too. But I'm actually making progress on them now, instead of just like, I'm going to, it's like I actually am. So they will. And you will absolutely.
Don't worry, everyone. We'll remind Naomi to do tapping on her writing of the book.
I have to do it before I do any other podcast or vlog or anything ever again.
I do hope there's a clarity book in there too.
Yes.
Brilliant. And brilliant. Anyone listening in, obviously, as part of, Jean will share in a minute the gifts and the raffles and things like that. I do know that clarity tapping is featuring in there, and there's the opportunity for someone to have a clarity session. So absolutely, that's part of, the fundraising. It's been my absolute joy to have a chat to you. So good to see you online. I look forward to chatting again soon, and we'll see you again.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.